Annie Frey Show on 97.1 FM Talk.
So I think we have a very strong position right now. They know I'm going to do that if they don't make a deal. The bridges are going to be gone. Literally in less than, I would say in 2 hours, most of the bridges, the major bridges will all be gone. And the power plants in 1 day. And, you know, if I can avoid doing that, I'd like to do that. The hardest thing to build is a power plant. The longest thing to build is a bridge. Takes a long time to rebuild and build bridges. And that's what I used to do for a living, construction. It takes years to build these things. And, you know, and knock them out in 1 hour, and it takes many years. It really decimates a country. So those are the two big things. And then there's always the desalinization plants. And who am I hurting there? I'm hurting the people. So I'm not looking to do that. I just want, very simply, they cannot have a nuclear weapon.
President Trump speaking with Fox and Friends about the bridges and the nuclear power plants, these types of targets for the United States to continue their campaign. They came back to bombing for quite a few days here and have for the last handful of days put that on pause. So what happens next in the conflict with Iran? Let's speak to our guest. Victoria Coates joins us once again, Vice President of Heritage's Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy, also the former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump. Victoria, thank you for being with us once again. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Of course, Annie. Good to talk to you.
So can you just set the table for us right now on where we are in this conflict right now? The president is very consistent. No nuclear weapons for Iran. And then maybe the tied for first addendum to that original point was open the Strait of Hormuz. How is the president doing right now in working to accomplish those things?
Well, I think we're actually doing, contrary to what you might hear on the legacy media, quite well incrementally moving toward those big overarching goals. And so what is the 13 days you were talking about, the additional strikes did, is it demonstrated to Iran that they haven't rebuilt. They haven't regained the capabilities that they had 4 months ago. And we can continue to strike them wherever and whenever we please. And so, that has further degraded their military capacity, their ability to communicate, some of their infrastructure. And it's making the situation worse and worse inside the country. And that's where I think we're really making progress, is their economy is spiraling out of control. I got some numbers over the weekend that they're at something like 88.6% inflation. I mean, imagine in the United States, if we hit 5% inflation, there's a collective meltdown, and food is at 134% inflation. So just, compounding economic problems they can't fix in their weakened state. So I think,
Go ahead. Go finish your point. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I was just going to say, I think that the president's patient and is willing to let that pressure just grow because, as I said, there's nothing that can do about it.
I love that you just said you think that the president is patient, because I feel like that's not a word that his detractors certainly, that's a complimentary word. So, of course, they wouldn't say that about President Trump. But if president were impatient, can you tell us what that might look like as a contrast to how he actually is approaching the conflict?
I think if he were, as described, desperate for any deal to get onto the midterms, if that were true, he would have struck a bad deal, an Obama-style deal. That deal is there. You could go into something similar, JCPOA, 2.0 or light or however you want to call it. And that's, I was, dirty little secret, I participate in some bipartisan foreign policy closed-door sessions, and all the Democrats 6 weeks ago were just saying, we all know that's what's going to happen. Like, no, he's not Obama. He doesn't want any deal for any deal's sake. And the other thing he could do, if he were impatient, is engage in the kind of shock and awe-style bombing that folks have been urging him to do to take out the infrastructure, the bridges and the power plants, because that will be so hard to build back. But he has a heart for the Iranian people. He doesn't want to do that to them. He's hopeful that we can, build leverage over time. We've demonstrated the willingness to do the kinetic action and get to the deal he wants that way, rather than by those two impatient paths.
So we're speaking with Victoria Coates, Vice President of Heritage Foundation's Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy. It felt like there was a big pause, a big hope for diplomacy, that the president was very much so invested in At this point in the conflict, to me, it almost feels like they had to publicly try that, run it out as much as they possibly could. Maybe they knew how it was going to go in the end, but if they didn't actually try it, didn't actually try to give Iran the opportunity to come to some common sense here and be diplomatic about it, that doing what they actually have to do in the end to make Iran see reason or move past the point where they don't have any choice but to see reason, that the diplomacy was a necessary step in this process. Do you feel as though they knew that that wasn't going to work, that the Iranian leaders, whomever they might be at the time, weren't going to come to the table and say, you're right, we were wrong, let's move forward together? Did the administration understand that that's the way that was going to be at the time?
Oh, they certainly did. From my conversations with them, nobody was holding out much hope, but they definitely thought it was worth a shot because self-preservation can be a very powerful motivator in these situations. And if that somebody might say inside Iran, hey, I want to save what little I can. I want to save my family. I'm going to, try to cut a deal with the Americans. That's still on the table. That could still happen. But it hasn't happened yet. And the other thing we're watching very closely from Heritage is splits within the Iranian regime. So we seem to have two factions emerging. One, the very hardline IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This is just one piece of the Iranian military, the most ideological, the most extreme, that they seem to be the ones saying, no, we're going to, go down with the ship. We're going to fight to our last civilian that we're going to slaughter. But then you have the more pragmatists in the government who are saying, hey, we don't have the money or wherewithal to pursue the nuclear program right now anyway. Why don't we satisfy the Americans and go forward? So maybe we also need to wait and see which faction emerges as the decision maker inside Iran.
Victoria Coates speaking with us right now. Just, I like to give people like you who are so well-versed, who, as you mentioned, you're in the closed-door meetings and you're also in the open forums where this is being discussed. And I really like to present to you the counterpoint that is being made by the left, the detractors. And from one of our comments right now that is listening to this discussion, they said the JCPOA looks like a great deal this afternoon. Iran didn't have weaponizable uranium and the Strait of Hormuz was wide open. Is that a true statement or a false statement?
Unfortunately, I don't think it's exactly what that commenter wants it to be. So the JCPOA preserved Iran's right to start incrementally enriching uranium at a higher and higher percentage. It did not end their pursuit of a nuclear bomb. And we knew in 2018, when the nuclear archive was revealed by Israel, that they had preserved and kept secret under very tight security the plans for nuclear weapons that they had procured. Now, if they never wanted a nuclear weapon, which is how they negotiated the JCPOA, why didn't they hand all that over during the negotiations? What a demonstration of good faith that would have been. But they didn't. They kept it secret. And so once that was revealed, we knew that was their intent all along. And it made the JCPOA meaningless because it was over. It ended in 2025. It was a 10-year deal. So at this point, had we stayed in that deal, they could be off to the races. What we did was put so much pressure on them during the first term that they didn't have the resources to do that. And you can look at when they started installing all of the highly sophisticated centrifuges necessary to get to weapons grade uranium enrichment. That started in 2021 when the sanctions came off, or the Biden folks stopped enforcing the sanctions. So I don't think the JCPOA was a great deal by any stretch of the imagination, nor do I think it was working.
Yeah, I appreciate your response to that because it's a simple retort that's often thrown out in conjunction with this conflict, but very little substance usually follows in the discussion as to why or why not. So that's why we have you here, because before I let you go, today is, at this very moment right now, the National Cathedral in Washington is receiving the body of late Senator Lindsey Graham. And it's quite a spectacle. I think the United States Senator is very deserving of someone who has given his service to this country in the way that Senator Graham has. I did note that as they were showing the visuals of this event taking place before the actual service began, there was a group of people having a discussion on the floor that included Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, Bibi Netanyahu, of course, with Israel. Zelensky is there. Marco Rubio is there. And I'm just thinking, 5 minutes on the floor at a cathedral right now. They looked intent in their discussions. there's a lot going on with just those individuals in that collection right there. And I'm just wondering, do you feel as though any of these sorts of conflicts, of course, Ukraine, Russia, Iran, everybody else in the Middle East who has kind of taken the side of the United States against Iran, does a conversation take place on the floor here that has any sort of measurable impact on what happens tomorrow after the service is over?
Oh, I think absolutely. And, it's a very somber day. Senator Graham was a friend and a very congenial guy. I used to work for Senator Cruz. They had such disagreements over policy matters. But Senator Cruz is there today. I just saw him in the crowd along with many, many senators, obviously the entire cabinet and others, OMB director, that kind of FBI director. And, this is just such a tribute, as you said, to Senator Graham's service, a life of service, both to his family, his state, and his country. And, he did a lot of good. And bringing four principals together like that and having them say, hey, let's have a quick meeting. Let's get on the same page. That's incredibly beneficial. And we had the meeting with Netanyahu and President Trump earlier today. I'm not sure if the Zelensky meeting has happened yet or not, but, that's super helpful to get those guys here. In many ways, it's Senator Graham's last gift to President Trump.
Oh, well said. Victoria Coates, we're grateful for your time today. Thank you for lending your expertise to our conversation.
Thank you, Annie. Take care.
You as well. Bye-bye. Vice President of Heritage Foundation's Catherine and Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for National Security and Foreign Policy. Also former Deputy National Security Advisor to President Donald Trump. We'll break. When we come back, check in on the text line. 314-241-9797. Have you answered this question? How much do you care about holding Fauci accountable? You invested in this or not? 314-241-9797. Send us your text and vote on the Annie Frey YouTube channel, youtube.com/@AnnieFrey. We'll be right back.